It's our second summer in this garden, and so much has changed over the past 2 years. When we first moved in, I planted just a couple of bushes and shrubs. A lot of what I had had from pots that I saved from our last property, and everything looked really sad, honestly. I'm shocked that a lot of it made it. I started a whole bunch of things from seed, like yarrow, coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, and then I planted a few bulbs the first season as well, right when we moved in. I wanted to grow a lot of things myself for the cost savings and then also just to see if I could do it and to get varieties that weren't available to me. The first spring, I started by adding some hostas and then adding a couple of bushes that I had gotten on sale the previous year. They were dormant over the winter and then they were starting to kind of perk up that first spring in the garden. You can see that I have a lot of bare spots, and most of what I have, like I said, I started from seed or I got it from really small starts from friends and family, or I bought it on sale on the sale rack and nursed it back to health. So not much of what I have is full size at all or even close. It's kind of discouraging when you start your first garden and you see all that bare space, but it's worth it to wait and just let those roots grow underground because the next year after being dormant, if you make sure that you fertilize and water really well, you will have such a payoff in the coming years. Drip irrigation was so valuable to me during this time because we get so hot in the summer and it made it so much easier for me to maintain water and make sure that everything had what it needed. As my plants were working to grow underground, I did have a few blooms, especially from my daffodil bulbs that I planted, as well as my verbascum that I grew from seed. This was its second year because it was in a pot before. And then same thing with my yarrow. I grew it from seed, it stayed in a pot for a year, and then it bloomed on the second year. This phlox from my mom's garden also bloomed its first year, and then these asters that I nursed back to health from the sale rack at the store also grew really nicely. My sedum put on some growth and I was able to spread it around in the garden. And then also my evergreens were starting to show signs of life and growth. I could tell when my euonymus started leafing out again and getting that yellow color that things were going to be so different this year for me during year 2 of this garden space. This euonymus has probably doubled in size since I planted it last winter, and then my daffodils were just going crazy. They bloomed so nicely. Everything has filled out and is probably double or triple the size that it was the years past, except for my evergreens. Those are slow growing. But you can see as I go through this footage that things are starting to take shape and to take up space in the garden. These daffodils were so gorgeous, and the sedum behind them is already filling in more than it did in years past, and you can just see the edge of my Japanese maple and evergreen in the background that are already looking so nice. At the far left corner, there are daylilies that I planted as transplants from my mom that are probably triple the size of when I got them, and they're already starting to prepare to bloom here in early May. You can see here that my hostas are starting to fill in, and it's wild because when I got most of them, they were just tiny starts with only 1 or 2 leaves, and they did mostly nothing last year. They hardly grew any leaves at all, but now they look like full-on plants, and every hosta is at least a foot across and still growing. Most of these hostas should be at least 2 or 3 feet across, and it'll look so nice even next year. I'm super excited to see how they continue to grow and to put on some space in the garden. This viburnum did nothing its first year in the ground. It did not have blooms or berries, but I'm so excited to see that it's already filling out nicely this year. It has quite a bit of new growth and it's just covered in blooms. My blue spruce is loving life and is already putting on some growth this spring, as well as my bee balm and my peonies. My Weigelia did not bloom last year, but it did this year, and it looked really nice when it was in bloom, and it's also put on some new growth. And my hardy geranium has probably tripled in size and also bloomed beautifully this year when it did nothing last year as well. My false indigo are looking really great. They were just barely sticks last year with hardly any leaves, and they're looking really nice so far already this year. And all three of my red twig dogwoods have probably doubled in size. The tag said that they would get about 3 feet across, but they're already past that and they're looking so, so nice and full. And they also have buds on them, and they didn't bloom last year, but it looks like they're going to this year. After planting 20 peonies bare root 2 years ago, they did not a ton last year. They came out of the ground and I was pleased that they had some leaves, and I think one or two had one bud each maybe. So not a ton of showy flowers, but this year I have just had such beautiful blooms. I've had over probably 70 buds already, and I've put some back in the fridge so that I can use those for floral arranging, and I'm super, super excited to see that they've not only probably tripled in size, but their blooms are coming on really nicely. I'm excited to see how they do in year 3 especially. I grew this lamb's ear in a pot from a cutting from my old garden, and it is probably 10 times the size that it was when it was just a few tiny leaves and barely a piece of roots as I planted it here in this garden 2 years ago. Same thing with these daylilies. They were transplanted from my mom's garden, and they were probably a third of the size, and they have just really filled in this space and are looking so nice after just 1 year of fertilizing and heavy watering and making sure to water consistently with my drip irrigation. I have to end on this Nepeta that I think was supposed to get about 18 inches across, but is easily 2 feet across and about a foot tall. It's looking so, so incredible and really filling in this space in such a lovely drift. My encouragement to you is that if you're planting a garden from seed, or if you're a first-time gardener or using cuttings or transplants from friends or family, just know that it is worth the wait. Your garden will fill in and it will look beautiful for years to come. My garden is nowhere near perfect, but it has filled in so much over the past 2 years and changed as I've grown and changed as a gardener as well. I hope that you'll join me in the journey and grow alongside me.